The royal palace of New Athens gleamed under 3 moons, its crystalline spires reaching toward the stars. Inside, Princess Rose stood before her father, King Atlas, her shoulders slumped and her violet eyes cast downward. Unlike other members of their species, the stellar folk, she lacked the characteristic tall, muscular build. Her frame remained small and delicate, making her stand out among her people. Another failure in combat training, King Atlas boomed, his voice echoing through the throne room. How do you expect to lead our warriors when you cannot even lift a plasma sword? His massive form towered over her, his disappointment clear in his glowing eyes. Rose's hands trembled at her sides. Father, I try. I train every day, but my body. Excuses! The king's fist slammed against his throne's armrest. Your younger siblings already lead squadrons. You, my firstborn, bring shame to our bloodline. Perhaps it was a mistake to let you keep your position as heir. The words cut deeper than any training wound. Rose bowed her head, fighting back tears that would only prove her weakness. As she turned to leave, the palace alerts blared. Red lights pulsed through the crystalline walls. Your Majesty! A guard burst into the throne room. A small ship has breached our defense grid. It's unlike anything we've seen before. The king stood, his royal armor gleaming. Origin? Earth, Your Majesty. It's a human vessel. Rose's head snapped up. Humans were rare in this sector, known for their resourcefulness rather than strength. Their species was considered physically inferior to the stellar folk, yet they had carved out their place among the stars through ingenuity and determination. The ship landed in the palace courtyard despite their defensive measures. The guards surrounded it, weapons ready. When the hatch opened, a single figure emerged, a human woman of average height, with short gray hair and weathered skin that spoke of years of experience. I am Commander Anna Walsh of Earth's Special Forces, retired, she announced, showing no fear before the towering alien guards. I received your palace's open call for combat instructors. Her eyes found Rose in the crowd, noting her smaller stature with interest. King Atlas laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. A human instructor? For our elite warriors? You must be joking. Commander Walsh's expression remained neutral. I've trained warriors across 12 systems. Size isn't everything, Your Majesty. Sometimes the smallest fighters become the deadliest, if they're taught properly. Rose stepped forward, drawn to the human's confident stance. For the first time in years, she felt a spark of hope. Perhaps this human understood what it meant to be underestimated, to be judged by size alone. The king waved his hand dismissively. Fine. Take my weak daughter as your student. When she fails again, it will prove that humans have nothing to teach us. He turned to Rose. This is your last chance. If Commander Walsh cannot make you worthy of your title, you will forfeit your claim to the throne. As the court dispersed, Commander Walsh approached Rose. The human's eyes held no pity, only assessment. They say you can't lift a plasma sword, she said quietly. Good thing I don't teach traditional combat. Are you ready to learn how to fight smart instead of strong? Rose straightened her spine, meeting the human's gaze. Yes, Commander. I'm ready for anything. Dawn broke over New Athens as Rose made her way to the palace training grounds. She found Commander Walsh already there, sitting cross-legged on the ground with her eyes closed. No weapons lay nearby, only a small metal box. You're late, the human said without opening her eyes. The others doubt you'll last a week under my training. How long do you think you'll survive? Rose swallowed hard. As long as necessary, Commander. Walsh's eyes opened, a slight smile crossing her weathered face. Good answer. First lesson, forget everything you know about combat. Your people's methods won't work for you. Instead, we'll use your weaknesses as strengths. How can weakness be strength? Rose asked, confusion clear in her voice. Watch. Walsh stood and walked to one of the training dummies, massive things designed for the stellar folk's height and strength. She pressed something on her wrist device, and suddenly the dummy swung its practice sword with crushing force. Rose expected the human to dodge. Instead, Walsh stepped into the dummy's reach. The sword passed harmlessly over her head, and with one precise movement, she tapped a point on the dummy's leg. The entire machine crashed to the ground. Your people rely on strength and reach. They expect opponents to match their power or run away. Being smaller makes us harder to hit, and knowing anatomy makes us deadly. Walsh opened the metal box, revealing a set of thin, silvery needles. These are nerve disruptors. One touch can bring down opponents 3 times your size. For the next several hours, Walsh drilled Rose on anatomy. Every species had weak points, joints, nerve clusters, balance centers. The princess learned to spot these vulnerabilities, marking them on holographic models with increasing speed and accuracy. Your small size is an advantage, Walsh explained as they worked. You can move faster, slip through gaps in defenses, strike precisely where others can only swing broadly. But first, you need to build your real strength. My muscles, Rose began. No. Walsh tapped Rose's forehead. This is your weapon. Your mind. Tell me, what happens in your father's war council? Rose blinked at the sudden change of topic. I wouldn't know. I'm not allowed to attend. Exactly. They underestimate you. Use that. While they focus on your physical weakness, observe. Learn. Knowledge wins wars before they begin. That evening, Rose snuck into the palace library. She studied tactical databases, battle histories, and anatomical records of every species in the known galaxy. When she finally slept, her dreams were filled with pressure points and strike patterns. The next morning, she arrived early to find Walsh practicing a strange, flowing movement pattern. Earth martial art, Walsh explained. Based on using an opponent's strength against them. Ready to learn? Rose took her stance, wincing as her muscles protested from yesterday's training. But something had changed. For the first time, she didn't feel hopeless. Her weakness wasn't a curse, it was just another challenge to overcome. In the shadows of the training ground, King Atlas watched silently. His daughter moved differently now, with purpose instead of shame. Perhaps this human instructor wasn't such a fool after all. But one day of progress meant nothing. He would wait and see if this new approach could truly forge a warrior from his disappointment of a daughter. Little did he know, a warrior was already emerging, just not the kind he expected. 3 weeks into her training, Rose found herself blindfolded in the palace garden, surrounded by training droids. Commander Walsh stood at the garden's edge, monitoring the exercise. Remember, Walsh called out. Feel their movements through the ground. Listen to their servos. Smell their power cells. A warrior uses all senses, not just sight. The first droid rushed forward. Rose felt the vibration through her feet, heard the whir of its joints, and ducked precisely as its arms swept over her. Her hand shot out, nerve disruptor needle striking a key junction. The droid collapsed. Good! Walsh activated 2 more droids. Now use their size against them. Rose moved like water between the machines, her small frame allowing her to slip through gaps that larger warriors would never attempt. Each movement was precise, calculated. When one droid swung, she guided its momentum into the other, sending both crashing down. From the palace balcony, military officials watched with growing interest. Among them stood General Stone, the king's most trusted advisor. Impressive, he muttered. The human's methods are unorthodox, but effective. The king frowned. She's learning parlor tricks, not true combat. Then test her, General Stone suggested. The annual warrior trials begin tomorrow. Let her compete. That evening, Walsh found Rose practicing in the moonlight. Your father has entered you in tomorrow's trials, she said without preamble. Rose's heart raced. But I'm not ready. The trials are meant for seasoned warriors. You're more ready than you think. Walsh sat beside her student. Tell me what you've learned about the other competitors. Rose closed her eyes, recalling her secret observations. Port Guard Max relies too heavily on his right side. Captain Reed telegraphs her kicks by shifting her weight first. Lieutenant West gets frustrated easily and makes mistakes when angry. And what else? They all expect me to fail. They won't take me seriously. Walsh smiled. Exactly. Tomorrow, you're not fighting with just your body. You're fighting with every observation, every detail, every weakness you've discovered while they ignored you. Your greatest weapon is their underestimation. The next morning, the trial arena filled with spectators. Rose stood among the warriors, looking tiny and fragile in her light combat suit. Whispers and chuckles rippled through the crowd. The first round paired her against Port Guard Max, a mountain of muscle and armor. He grinned down at her as they took their positions. "Don't worry, Princess," he said loudly enough for the crowd to hear. "I'll try not to break you." Rose said nothing, her mind cataloging details. Heavy armor on his right, lighter on his left. Favors his right leg. Overconfident stance. The signal rang out. Max charged forward, expecting an easy victory. Rose moved like smoke, flowing around his strike. Her fingers found the gap in his armor where the pieces joined, and a nerve disruptor needle slipped home. Max's right leg buckled. As he stumbled, Rose danced around him, striking 3 more pressure points in rapid succession. The massive warrior crashed to the ground, paralyzed but conscious. Silence fell over the arena. King Atlas leaned forward on his throne, his expression unreadable. Rose helped Max up once the paralysis wore off. "Thank you for not breaking me," she said softly, earning surprised laughter from the crowd. In the preparation area, Walsh met her with a proud smile. "How do you feel?" Rose flexed her fingers, surprised to find them steady. "I feel strong. Not like them, but strong in my own way." "Good." Walsh's eyes gleamed. "Because that was just the first round. Ready to show them what else you've learned?" Rose looked at her next opponent, already sizing up weaknesses and opportunities. "Ready, Commander." They won't know what hit them. As the warrior trials continued, Rose became a blur of precise movements and devastating strikes. Captain Reed fell to a combination of pressure points that left her gasping on the arena floor. Lieutenant West's anger became his undoing when Rose used his own momentum to send him crashing into the barrier. Words spread through the palace. Servants whispered about the princess who fought like shadow and struck like lightning. Warriors who had once mocked her now watched her movements with studied interest. Between matches, King Atlas summoned Commander Walsh to his private chambers. "What sorcery have you taught my daughter?" he demanded. "This is not the way of our people." Walsh stood her ground. "I taught her to be effective, not traditional. Sometimes evolution requires breaking old patterns. She uses tricks and deception instead of honorable combat. She uses intelligence and skill," Walsh corrected. "Your Majesty, in all your battles, did you ever face an enemy who fought exactly as you did?" The king fell silent, remembering campaigns against various species, each with their own fighting styles. "The final round approaches," Walsh continued. "Watch your daughter closely. She's not just fighting, she's leading by example. Showing your people a new way to be strong." The arena was packed for the final match. Rose's opponent was Thunder, the reigning champion of the Royal Guard. He stood twice her height, his armor gleaming with badges of victory. As they faced each other, Thunder spoke quietly. "I've watched your matches, Princess. You've earned my respect, but I won't hold back." Rose nodded. "I would be insulted if you did." The battle that followed left the audience breathless. Thunder's attacks were precise and powerful, but Rose moved through them like water through rocks. Each time he thought he had her cornered, she found impossible gaps to slip through. But Thunder was champion for a reason. He adapted, learning from each failed attack. A glancing blow caught Rose's shoulder, sending her stumbling. The crowd gasped. Rose rolled with the impact, her mind racing. Thunder had studied her patterns, just as she had studied others. Time to show him something new. She retreated, appearing to favor her injured shoulder. Thunder pressed his advantage, exactly as she predicted. At the last moment, Rose dropped and slid between his legs, striking both knees with nerve disruptors. As he fell forward, she leaped onto his back, her fingers finding the crucial pressure point at the base of his neck. Thunder froze, then slowly toppled forward. The arena erupted in cheers. Rose helped Thunder up, both warriors bowing to each other in respect. When she turned to bow to her father's box, she found the king standing, his expression complicated. "The trials are complete," King Atlas announced, his voice carrying across the arena. "But I have one final test." The crowd fell silent as the king himself descended to the arena floor, removing his ceremonial robe. Walsh stepped forward in alarm, but Rose held up a hand to stop her. "Father? You have proven yourself clever, daughter. Now prove yourself worthy of the crown. Face me in combat." Rose's heart pounded, but her voice remained steady. "As you wish, father." The entire arena held its breath as father and daughter faced each other, the old way of warfare against the new. The king's challenge had raised the stakes beyond a simple tournament victory. This would determine not just Rose's worth as a warrior, but the future of their people's combat traditions. Commander Walsh watched from the sidelines, her face tense. Everything she had taught Rose would be tested in this moment. But more importantly, everything Rose had taught herself, about courage, adaptation, and finding strength in difference, would face its ultimate trial. The arena grew still as King Atlas raised his ceremonial blade, its plasma edge humming with deadly energy. Rose stood before him, looking impossibly small, armed only with her nerve disruptors and Walsh's training. "No daughter of mine will rule through trickery," the king declared. "Show me true strength or step aside." Rose's voice carried clearly across the arena. "True strength comes in many forms, father. Let me show you." The king charged forward, his blade cutting through the air with frightening speed. Rose didn't retreat. Instead, she stepped into his attack, just as Walsh had taught her that first day. The massive blade whistled over her head as she rolled beneath his guard. Her fingers struck quickly, targeting pressure points, but the king's armor blocked her attacks. He had studied her matches well. This would not be won easily. "Is this all you've learned?" the king taunted, pressing his attack. "To duck and weave like a frightened child?" Rose remained focused, analyzing his movements. The king's fighting style was legendary, perfected over centuries of combat. But in its perfection lay its predictability. Every strike followed ancient forms, each movement bound by tradition. She led him through the arena, letting him drive her back. To the crowd, it looked like retreat. To Walsh, watching intently, it was a dance. Rose was teaching her father a lesson, one step at a time. "Your weakness shames our bloodline," the king growled, launching a devastating combination of strikes. Rose's voice remained calm. "My weakness taught me to be strong in different ways. To observe. To think. To adapt." She slipped through his guard again, this time striking the joints of his armor. "While others saw only my size, I studied every warrior in this palace." The king's armor began to creak, its joints compromised by Rose's precise attacks. "Including you, father. Your left knee still troubles you from the Battle of 3 Moons. You favor your right side to compensate. Your traditional forms are perfect, but perfectly predictable." Anger flashed in the king's eyes. He abandoned his measured attacks, swinging his blade in a furious arc. This was the opening Rose had waited for. She darted forward, using his own momentum against him. Her fingers found the exact point where old injury met stressed armor. The mighty King Atlas stumbled. Rose moved like lightning, striking 3 more pressure points in rapid succession. The king's armor locked up, and his ceremonial blade clattered to the ground. Before he could recover, Rose stood over him, a nerve disruptor pressed to his throat. The arena erupted in shocked whispers. No one had ever seen the king defeated, let alone by his weak daughter. "Do it," the king growled. "Prove your strength by defeating your father." Rose withdrew her hand. "True strength isn't about defeating others, father. It's about protecting them. Even from their own stubborn pride." She offered him her hand. "You taught me that long ago, before size and tradition became more important than wisdom." For a long moment, The king stared at his daughter's offered hand. In her stance he saw not weakness, but a new kind of strength. In her eyes he saw not defiance, but determination to lead their people into a new era. Slowly, King Atlas took her hand and rose. "Perhaps," he said loudly enough for all to hear, "it is time for our warriors to learn new ways of being strong." The crowd's cheers shook the arena. Commander Walsh smiled proudly as father and daughter stood together, a bridge between old ways and new. But Rose's greatest victory wasn't in combat, it was in showing that true strength comes in many forms, and that sometimes the greatest warriors are forged through adversity rather than born through privilege. 1 year after the warrior trials, the palace training grounds had transformed. Where once stood only traditional combat rings, now there were obstacle courses designed for warriors of all sizes. Stellar folk nobles trained alongside smaller species, each learning from the other's strengths. Rose walked through the grounds, watching a group of young warriors practice. Among them was her youngest sister, small like her, no longer ashamed of her size but proud of her agility. Commander Walsh worked with another group nearby, teaching a mix of traditional warriors and new recruits the art of adaptive combat. "The other kingdoms are impressed," King Atlas said, joining his daughter on her walk. He had changed too, his traditional armor now modified with elements of lighter, more flexible design. "They're sending their warriors to learn our new methods. Even the strongest among them have realized the value of fighting smart." Rose smiled. "And our warriors learn from them in return. Strength and strategy, tradition and innovation, we're stronger when we combine them." They paused to watch a demonstration. A massive warrior wielding a plasma blade worked in perfect synchronization with a smaller partner using nerve disruptors. Together, they took down training droids that neither could have defeated alone. "The old guard still grumbles sometimes," the king admitted. "Change doesn't come easily to our people." "But it comes," Rose replied. "Every day, I see more warriors choosing to learn new ways. Not abandoning the old ways, but building upon them." They reached the palace balcony, overlooking the capital city. Below, the streets buzzed with activity. Diplomatic ships from dozens of worlds crowded the spaceports, each bringing warriors eager to train in what was now called the Unified Combat Academy. Commander Walsh approached, her gray hair now streaked with silver. "Your Majesty, Princess. The new training program is ready for your review." King Atlas nodded. "Proceed, Commander. My daughter has taught me to trust your methods." As Walsh laid out the plans, Rose noticed a group of young nobles watching her from across the grounds. Once, their eyes had held mockery. Now they showed respect, even admiration. They no longer saw a weak princess, they saw a leader who had changed their society for the better. "There's one more thing," Walsh said, producing a small box. "A graduation gift, you might say. I'm returning to Earth soon. My work here is done." Rose opened the box to find a set of ceremonial nerve disruptors, masterfully crafted. Their handles bore inscriptions in both human and stellar folk script. "True strength lies in wisdom, not size." "You're leaving?" Rose asked, her voice catching. Walsh smiled. "A teacher's greatest success is when their student surpasses them. You've grown beyond anything I could have imagined. Now it's time for you to teach others. The Council has approved your proposal," King Atlas added. "The Academy will officially become an interstellar institution, with you as its head instructor." Rose's eyes widened. "But what about my royal duties? What better way to lead our people than by teaching the next generation? Besides," the king's eyes twinkled, "I'm not retiring just yet." That evening, Rose stood in the same throne room where her father had once mocked her weakness. Now she addressed a gathering of warriors from across the galaxy, each eager to learn the combat style that had revolutionized warfare. "Welcome to New Athens," she began. "Here, we believe that every warrior has something to teach, and everyone has something to learn. Size, species, tradition, these are not limitations, but opportunities. Together, we will forge a new understanding of what it means to be strong." As she spoke, Commander Walsh quietly slipped away, boarding her ship for Earth. Her mission was complete. She had come to teach one princess and had helped change an entire society. As her ship broke atmosphere, she smiled, knowing that somewhere in the galaxy, a new generation of warriors was learning that true strength comes in all sizes. The legend of the weak princess who became a warrior would be told for generations, not as a story of defiance, but of transformation, proof that sometimes the greatest strength lies in being willing to change.